A few months ago, I did a video on Aggretsuko Season 3, which certainly proved to be my most popular video to date. With that in mind, I always figured I would talk about this show again, especially since I don't think my first video quite went into enough detail as to just how relatable this show can be. Aggretsuko, for those who don't know, is an anime that takes place in a world of talking animals, and follows a red panda in her mid-20s named Retsuko, who works a dead-end office job and copes with it through singing death metal karaoke in her spare time. Now, personally, I already found the show pretty relatable after watching Season 1, as I am also a woman in her mid to late 20s who has worked some pretty soul-crushing jobs in my time. But it was Season 2 that, for me, became relatable to the point of being almost uncomfortable to watch at times. Season 2 sees Retsuko dealing with a new co-worker named Anai. At first it seems as though he's just a peppy newcomer, but soon it becomes clear that he's what you might consider a toxic co-worker. And boy, is this an accurate portrayal of a toxic co-worker, at least from my own personal perspective. More on that later. Anai clearly has a lot of anxiety over his job. He doesn't want to work and he absolutely cannot take criticism. Because of this, when Retsuko tries to train him, he decides to completely turn on her, sending her threatening emails claiming she's the one creating a toxic work environment for him, treating every single bit of mild critique like slander to his character. When on the job, he acts like everything is fine and normal, keeping all of his anger and hate contained within emails. Over time, other characters like Haida and Sonoda try to deal with him, but also end up in the firing line for his toxic behaviour. Now, I'm sure a lot of us have dealt with at least one bad co-worker in the past, but for me, this whole storyline hit very close to home. Truth is, I've dealt with at least one co-worker almost exactly like Anai before. The type who absolutely cannot take criticism, has a Jekyll and Hyde type personality, and is generally maligned by everyone else in the workplace. I won't go into detail for privacy reasons, but let's just say, well, since I'm not Japanese and a brand new intern obviously couldn't get away with this sort of behaviour in the UK, the big difference really was that my equivalent to an Anai was actually above me in the hierarchy. Like I said, the accuracy of this portrayal of a toxic co-worker was almost uncomfortable to watch at times. Even though it's exaggerated, I couldn't help but think of my own situation while watching this, and that's not a bad thing. In some ways it could be quite cathartic. Retsuko's first reaction to Anai sending her a threatening email is mostly confusion as to what she did wrong. She attempts to be civil and talk to him about it, but he refuses, wanting her reaction in writing, most likely so he can use anything she might say to him against her later. At this point, Retsuko starts dealing with her own anxiety. Anxiety when dealing with a toxic co-worker flat out sucks. Constantly feeling anxious at work because you don't even want to be in the same room as that person is really distressing, and this show makes it very clear. Anai is portrayed as so unpleasant to an almost creepy degree. It manages to show just how unsettling being around someone like him truly is. Every time he's on screen, it's awkward and uncomfortable. His clearly fake happy and peppy pretense that makes way for his harsh, judgmental and near-obsessive dark side is kind of disturbing. What's interesting though is that the show makes it relatively clear that all of it is stemming from his anxiety. He never seems happy or satisfied with his bullying of Retsuko. Even when cornering her and trying to get proof of her so-called misconduct on record, he still seems overwhelmed by his insecurities, to the point where Retsuko admitting how he sucks at his job is the only thing that brings a smile to his face. Ultimately, what Anai is doing is projecting his own insecurities onto others. Anai is anxious and insecure about his flaws, and convinced that everyone else must see him in the same way. Thus, when Retsuko finally tells him what he wants to hear, how bad he is at his job, it's a satisfying but twisted confirmation for him. A strange paradox of hating the fact that he's flawed, but wanting to believe that he's too flawed to work properly, as that way he never has to actually try to accomplish anything. Hence, despite smiling and sounding victorious, he still doesn't exactly seem happy. As Anai proves himself to be more and more unpleasant, other co-workers try to get through to him but can't succeed. That is, until, while completely oblivious to his toxicity, Kabai steps in. Despite in the past having always been portrayed as annoying and over-talkative, this episode manages to make Kabai likeable. She softens the mood and uplifts his self-esteem by complimenting his cooking, something we later learn he is actually quite passionate about. Kabai's kind and motherly nature calms him down and gives him the mental support he needs, which allows her to actually teach him how to work in the office. Later, when Anai and Aggretsuko are forced to work together on a yakisoba stand, Kabai seems to recognise that Anai's real passion in life is for cooking, and she softly encourages him to try it out, leading to him finally plucking up the courage to put some effort into his work and finding success. And he then mellows out and starts up his own bento box business. Despite having dealt with, shall we say, my own equivalent to Anai in the past, honestly, I am actually fine with them showing him as somewhat sympathetic in the end. Don't get me wrong, awful co-workers who are just jerks for the hell of it certainly do exist, and the show does a good job of portraying people like that through Aggretsuko's chauvinistic boss, Mr. Tone. But at the same time, those who are as unhinged and unpleasant as Anai do exist, and often their toxicity stems from their own issues. Does that make their behaviour okay? Absolutely not. Anai's anxiety does not give him the right to become a bully, and the show makes it clear that yes, his behaviour is absolutely toxic. But rather than just saying, well, he's only like that because he's insecure, the show has him redeem himself by finally letting go of his insecurities, as he realises and accepts that he actually is talented when it comes to cooking. And come season 3, he's finally let go of the toxicity and is mellow and pleasant enough to hang out with. I don't work with my equivalent to Anai anymore, but quite frankly, I would prefer it if they'd been able to mellow out and evolve as a person too. Even though I hated working with them, I know they didn't get anything out of being so toxic towards people and always ended up just driving people away. And, well, maybe they deserved that, but I just feel as though it would have been better for everyone if they had actually tried and succeeded in being a better person. One thing Aggretsuko does well is that it will often show that everyone has a better side to them deep down. The end of season 1 showed that Tone can give brutally honest but very important advice to people, even people he doesn't get along with, when they need to hear it. Kabai proved this season to be more than just a loud blabbermouth, but rather a decent, hard-working mother who knows how to be there for and comfort anxious folks who feel out of their depth. And of course, it also shows that people like Anai, who seem eternally bitter and insecure, can indeed change for the better. And sure, at the end of the day, things don't always turn out as well as they did here. Sometimes terrible co-workers will remain awful and toxic, but that's kind of sad for both parties really. Like Anai, toxic co-workers usually aren't very happy people deep down, and they do have a lot of issues, hence why they take it out on the world. I'm not saying it's justified, I'm just saying it's kind of sad really. Sometimes the best thing you can do is simply give them no attention at all, positive or negative, and instead spend your time and energy on those you actually do care about, who can help you through it all. As someone who definitely relates to Aggretsuko in this situation, I'll agree this whole storyline felt kind of validating. My only hope is that if anyone out there feels as though they can relate to Anai in this situation, then one message to take to heart is that people are unlikely to hate you for being anxious or unskilled, but they may well learn to hate you if you treat them with bitterness and projection. If someone believes in you and wants to help you out, then consider letting them. You might just learn that people can grow to appreciate you more than you'd think. Thanks for watching the video. I've honestly wanted to talk about this ever since I made the previous Aggretsuko video, since, as you can tell, it is kind of a personal topic. For the sake of privacy, again, I won't go into any detail, but yeah, watching Anai was all too familiar, And, well, honestly, I do hope that the ex-co-worker of mine does go down the same route of growing as a person. Anyways, as always, like, share and subscribe and donate to me on Patreon if you can, and I hope to talk to you again soon. Goodbye.